Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today, really just to cut through the noise and get straight to what matters in understanding how we actually think.
Yeah.
You shared the art of thinking clearly with us, and wow, it's packed with insights into these common mental errors, these cognitive biases,
Hmm.
the ones that can lead us to make, well, less than rational decisions sometimes. So we're going to unpack some of the key ones.
Give you a sort of toolkit.
Exactly, a practical toolkit for clearer thinking without needing a PhD to understand it. And you might have some moments where you think, oh yeah, I've totally done that.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Right.
These aren't just occasional blips in our logic.
No.
The book really emphasizes that these are systematic patterns, predictable ways our brains tend to, well, misfire.
Right.
And just recognizing them can be, surprisingly helpful, liberating even.
Okay, so let's kick off with survivorship bias. This one really hit me.
Oh, yes.
We naturally tend to look at success stories, the famous authors, the big entrepreneur.
The ones who made
Right. But the book brilliantly points out what we don't see. All the others who failed.
the graveyards, as the book calls them.
Yeah, the graveyards of the unsuccessful attempts. For every big success, there are countless failures we never hear about. And that really skews our perception of how likely success actually is.
Precisely. And the big takeaway here, I think, is when you're looking at an opportunity, don't just focus on the shining examples.
You need the whole picture.
You really do. Actively look for the failure rates, the challenges. It gives you a much, much more realistic view.
And this ties in really well with what the book calls the swimmer's body illusion.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, this is where it gets kind of subtle. It's about mixing up selection factors with results, correlation and causation, basically.
Right.
And use the Harvard example. Lots of successful people went to Harvard. Okay. But did Harvard make them successful?
Or does Harvard just pick people who are already super talented and driven?
Exactly. It's like thinking swimming gives you that lean, athletic body when maybe people with that body type are just more likely to be good swimmers in the first place.
It's a selection effect.
Yeah.
So instead of thinking, oh, if I just get into Harvard, I'll be set, you should probably consider the qualities those people had before they even got there.
Helps you avoid giving all the credit to, the institution or the program.
Right. It's about understanding the inputs, not just the outputs.
Okay, so we've seen how focusing only on success can mislead us. Now, let's look at another way our brains try to find order, sometimes where there isn't any. The clustering illusion.
Ah, seeing patterns in randomness.
Yeah. Our tendency to see streaks or connections in just random events. The
Mm.
book has this kind of wild example of a Swedish guy hearing voices in birdsong recordings.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it sounds strange, but it highlights our innate need for order. Our brains are pattern-matching machines.
Which was useful for survival, presumably.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Spotting predators, finding food sources. But it goes wrong when we apply it to random noise. Seeing shapes in clouds or thinking of basketball players on a hot streak and can't miss.
Right, like the gambler's fallacy. Flipping heads 5 times doesn't make tails more likely next time.
Exactly. Each flip is independent. Recognizing this stops us jumping to conclusions based on what looks like a pattern, but is probably just chance.
So the takeaway is, be skeptical of patterns.
Especially in random situations, yeah.
Yeah.
Ask yourself,
Yeah.
is there a real reason for this, or am I just connecting dots that aren't really there?
Okay, now let's shift to how other people influence us. Sometimes hugely. The book talks about social proof and groupthink.
Powerful forces, definitely. Social proof is basically looking around to see what everyone else is doing, especially when we're unsure.
Like picking a restaurant, the busy one must be good.
That's the classic example. If one place is packed and the other's empty, you just assume the busy one's better. It's a mental shortcut.
And the book mentions canned laughter on TV shows.
Yeah, a subtle nudge. It tells you, this is funny, you should laugh too. It works, even though we know it's fake. It's tapping into that same instinct.
But there's a darker side, too. The book brings up Goebbels' total war speech.
Yeah. That shows how the sheer feeling of agreement in a crowd can make people accept really extreme ideas they might question on their own.
And that leads right into groupthink.
Which is fascinating and scary. Smart people, really capable people, making terrible decisions together.
Why? Because they want harmony.
Yeah, partly. Fear of rocking the boat, fear of disagreeing with the perceived consensus. Everyone thinks everyone else agrees, so they keep quiet.
So for anyone listening who values, getting different perspectives, this is a major warning sign.
Absolutely. Groupthink hates dissent. The book really stresses how vital it is to encourage different views, maybe even appoint a devil's advocate whose job is specifically to challenge the group's assumptions.
Speak your mind, basically, even if it's uncomfortable.
Especially if it's uncomfortable.
Okay, let's pivot. Sunk cost fallacy. Oh boy, I think we've all been there.
Definitely. This is that feeling that you have to keep going with something because you've already invested so much.
Time, money, effort, whatever, even if it's clearly, a lost cause.
The book uses examples like that big ad campaign that's just bombing, but management keeps throwing money at it because they already spent millions.
Or staying in a bad relationship because you've been together for years.
Right. The key is realizing the past investment is gone. It's sunk.
It shouldn't affect the future decision.
Exactly. The only question should be, based on where things are now, does it make sense to continue? A good mental check is to ask, if I were starting today, knowing what I know now, would I still invest in this?
Ah, that's helpful.
If the answer is no, you're probably falling for the sunk cost fallacy.
And that's huge for saving time and energy, right? Knowing when to cut your losses.
Crucial. It takes discipline, though. You have to detach emotionally from those past costs.
Okay, next. Reciprocity. That feeling that you owe someone if they do you a favor.
Yeah, it's deeply ingrained. The book gives that example of the supplier taking a client to a game, and boom, a big order follows.
Not necessarily because the product was best, but because the client felt obligated.
It can definitely play a role. The book mentions the evolutionary roots, too. Reciprocal altruism, helping each other out, was good for survival.
But it can be exploited.
For sure. Small gifts, favors,
Yeah.
they can create this subtle pressure to return the favor later, maybe in a bigger way. Just being aware of it helps you check your motives. Am I choosing this because it's the best option or because I feel like I owe them?
Good point. Okay, now, the big one. Confirmation bias. The book calls it the mother of all misconceptions.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's a powerful one. Basically, we love to be right,
So we look for information that proves we're right.
and we conveniently ignore or downplay or misinterpret anything that suggests we might be wrong.
Like the executive celebrating any tiny sign their strategy is working while ignoring the massive red flags.
Exactly. Our brains want consistency. We hate that feeling of cognitive dissonance, where our beliefs clash with reality.
There's that Warren Buffett quote, something about humans being best at interpreting new info so their old ideas stay intact.
That's the one. It captures it perfectly. So the antidote, you have to actively, consciously look for evidence that disproves your theory.
Actively try to prove yourself wrong, which feels unnatural.
It really does. The book mentions Charles Darwin did this systematically. And even just noticing when you dismiss something as an exception, that should be a warning sign. Maybe it's not an exception. Maybe it's evidence your rule is wrong.
Takes real intellectual honesty.
It does. Being willing to change your mind is key.
Okay, let's talk about availability bias. This explains why we worry more about, say, plane crashes than heart disease.
Right. Even though statistically, heart disease is a much bigger risk for most people.
Why? Because plane crashes are dramatic, vivid.
Exactly. They're easily recalled. They stick in our minds, especially with media coverage. Less dramatic, more common risks like diabetes or stomach cancer, as the book mentions, they just don't have that same mental accessibility.
So our internal risk map gets totally skewed by what's easy to remember.
Precisely. And for you, wanting knowledge that's quick, but also thorough, this is a big one. What comes to mind easily isn't always what's most important or most likely.
So you have to dig deeper than the headlines or the vivid anecdotes. Look at the actual data.
Consult the statistics.
Yeah.
Don't rely on just what pops into your head.
Right. Just because it was on the news last night doesn't make it common.
Okay, now let's get into probability, which, well, we're not great at intuitively.
Understatement.
The book talks about neglect of probability. We react more to the idea of something happening, the magnitude of it, than its actual statistical likelihood.
Like the electric shock experiment mentioned.
Yeah, people's anxiety didn't drop much, even when the chance of a shock was tiny, as long as it wasn't zero. That fear response is strong, regardless of the odds sometimes.
And that connects to the zero risk bias, right?
Absolutely. We love eliminating risk completely, even a tiny one. We'd rather get rid of a small risk entirely than significantly reduce a much larger risk.
Like the water treatment example in the book, focusing huge resources on eliminating a minuscule contaminant in one source.
While maybe ignoring a bigger but harder to eliminate risk elsewhere. even if tackling the bigger risk would give a better overall health outcome.
So we chase this illusion of perfect safety in one small area.
And it can lead to really inefficient decisions, misallocating time, money, effort. The key is to think about overall risk reduction, not just chasing zero in one spot.
Okay, let's talk scarcity and reactants. These feel very marketing related sometimes.
They often are.
Mhm.
Scarcity error. We just value things more if we think they're rare or limited.
Like the early Google Gmail invites, only available if you knew someone.
Made it seem super exclusive and desirable. Or the classic real estate agent trick. Oh, there are several other interested buyers. Creates urgency.
Makes you feel you'll miss out.
Exactly. And reactance is related. It's that forbidden fruit effect. Tell someone they can't have something.
And suddenly they want it more.
Pretty much. The book talks about a study with posters the ones students were told they couldn't choose suddenly became more attractive. Or the Romeo and Juliet effect with forbidden love.
It's like our sense of freedom being threatened makes the restricted option more appealing.
It does. These biases play right into our emotions. Being aware helps you ask, do I actually want this thing for its own merits? Or am I just reacting to the scarcity or the restriction?
Pause and evaluate the real value.
Get some rational distance.
Okay, nearly there. Base rate neglect. This is another probability hiccup.
It is. It's when we ignore the general statistics, the base rate, and focus instead on specific, maybe more compelling anecdotal information.
Like getting swept up in a startup's exciting story.
And completely forgetting that, the vast majority of startups fail. That's the base rate.
The book mentions Buffett again here with biotech.
Right. He looks at the base rate. Historically, how many biotech ventures actually succeed in bringing a drug to market? It's very low. So even if the science sounds amazing for one specific company, he considers that broader context.
So always ask, what usually happens in situations like this? What are the general odds?
Ground yourself in the statistics before getting carried away by the specifics of one case. Gives you a much more realistic foundation.
Okay, finally, framing. How the presentation changes everything.
Oh, hugely. The way information is presented or framed can totally shift your perception and your decision, even if the underlying facts are identical.
The classic example, 99% fat-free versus 1% fat.
Same thing, totally different feeling. 99% fat-free sounds much healthier.
And businesses do this all the time, right? Reframing negatives.
Oh, yeah. The stock market crash becomes a correction. Writing off failed acquisitions becomes goodwill impairment. Problems become challenges or opportunities.
So, for you listening, wanting to cut through noise, realize that how something is presented matters a lot.
You need to look past the frame and see the actual picture, the core information. Don't let the wrapping paper fool you.
Really highlights the need for critical thinking about the source and the delivery.
And just to briefly loop back, as the book points out early on, underpinning a lot of this is loss aversion.
Right. Losing feels worse than gaining feels good.
Exactly. The pain of a loss is psychologically more powerful than the pleasure of an equivalent gain. And that simple fact drives a lot of irrational behavior we've talked about, like holding on to losing stocks.
Okay, so that's a whirlwind tour through quite a few cognitive biases from the art of thinking clearly. Hopefully this deep dive has illuminated some of these common mental traps.
And giving you some practical ways to start noticing them.
Yeah, because that's the first step, isn't it? Just being aware they exist.
Recognizing their potential influence on how you think, how you decide.
So with that, here's a final thought for you to chew on. Think about a decision you made recently. Could be big, could be small. Now, run it through the filter of these biases we've discussed. Can you spot anything that might have been subtly shaping your thinking? Maybe survivorship bias, confirmation bias, sunk costs?
It's a useful exercise.
It really is,
Yeah.
because just recognizing those patterns in your own thinking, that's the first crucial step towards making clearer, more rational, and ultimately more effective decisions going forward.